Welcome to the programme. Beijing has cancelled all major public events for the Lunar New Year, even closing the iconic tourist spot of the Forbidden City as authorities try to contain the spread of the new coronavirus. Now, this comes as 3 Chinese cities have now been quarantined. We know at least 18 people who were infected have died from complications, and there are more than 500 people with confirmed cases. It's also spreading abroad. Let's take a look. China has confirmed actually its first death outside of Hubei province, where the outbreak began. The city of Wuhan, that's already in lockdown, and the authorities have suspended planes and trains in and out of the city, which is home to 11 million people. Now these cities of Heilongjiang and also of Heilongjiang, with a combined population of 8.5 million, they've also suspended all transport operations. Now you can take a look here. This is the general layout of Wuhan, and it's a city where the virus originated, actually in a market that was selling live animals for food. The World Health Organization, they have been holding a second day of talks in Geneva. Let's hear from their Director General.
This is, though, an emergency in China, but it has not yet become a global health emergency.
So what do we know about this virus? Well, it is understood to be a new strain of coronavirus not previously identified in humans. It affects the lungs, and symptoms start with a fever and a cough, which can progress to shortness of breath and breathing difficulties. The SARS virus, you might remember, severe acute respiratory syndrome that killed nearly 800 people globally. That was in the early 2000s. That was also a coronavirus, as is the common cold. And understanding how the virus transmits between people is one of the outstanding questions in this outbreak. Now, the new strain of the coronavirus is believed to have originated, I mentioned the market, this is it here, in Wuhan, through illegal transactions of wild animals. There are some suggestions that it even originated in snakes. Now, Wuhan is actually a place that is such an important centre. It's the high-speed passenger train network. It's one of the main cities and one of the main reasons that the virus has been able to spread so quickly. Let's take a look here. You have the city, and then just a few hours by train you begin to go to some of the most populous, most important cities. It's also one of the most important ports along China's Yangtze River. There's ships connecting the city to Shanghai, as you can see, also Chongqing. The river is more than 6,000 kilometres long. It's used to ship foods, products, also public transport. For more on the situation in the city, here's the BBC's Kerry Allen.
The disruptions are obvious today in the city. There have been reporters within Wuhan who've been going to train stations, and just chaos. People arriving, they were hoping to travel to different areas and saying that they weren't aware that that train networks have suddenly been suspended everywhere else as well. We've also seen footage on social media of cars arriving at tolling booths and finding out that they've got to turn around. So yeah, they're absolutely stranded, and there's not a lot of choice for, say, diverting, for example, because other regions are also affected by this, so they're quickly stepping up precautions.
Thanks to Kerry. Well, for more on the impact of the travel restrictions during Chinese New Year, here's Xiao Yingpeng from the BBC Chinese service in Washington, D.C.
It's like canceling Christmas in the West. As you know, Lunar New Year is the most important festival for Chinese, and the lockdown of Wuhan came only 3 days before the Lunar New Year, which is approaching this Saturday. And as you mentioned, we're not only facing the lockdown of 3 cities, but also canceling major events in other Chinese cities. At the same time, many Chinese families are actually considering canceling their dinner on New Year's Eve, which is also the most important meal of the year for millions of families. This is an indication of how dire the situation is at the moment.
And are you getting reaction from people to these cancellations? I mean, do people approve of what the government is doing?
Well, from Chinese social media, people are asking a lot of questions and having different arguments. Some doubt that the lockdown of Wuhan and the other 2 cities came a little too late because many Chinese people actually started to travel for Lunar New Year way before the actual New Year's Day, and the lockdown only came 3 days before that. So a lot of people might have left Wuhan already, and we have no idea where they have been. Wuhan is a major transport transportation hub in China. It has a population of over 11 million. That's larger than the country of Austria. It also has direct flights to New York, London, and Tokyo. And we don't know how exactly this lockdown can work, how long it will last. People are panicking. Grocery markets are packed with shoppers. Shelves are empty because people are worried that the supply within Wuhan is not going to last for a very long time.
Well, let's get the view of some of the travellers who are unable to travel out of the city of Wuhan.
Here we're at the very epicentre of the virus. Maybe it's best not to travel.
I'm confident that our government has the situation well in hand and that the situation will be quickly brought under control.
Well, hospitals in the city are completely overstretched with hundreds of patients waiting to see doctors. Here's the view of one nurse at a hospital in the city.
We are still all young ourselves, so honestly we feel lost and afraid. Our family members are worried too, but as long as we wear the protective clothing, we'll be okay.
Well, speaking of protective clothing, millions of people across China have been wearing surgical masks, not only because of this current coronavirus outbreak, but also to protect against high pollution levels. But some health experts, they're sceptical about the effectiveness against airborne viruses. Dr. Natalie McDermott, she was involved in fighting the outbreak of the Ebola virus. Here's her view on whether wearing a mask makes a difference in containing the spread of this virus.
I think if someone is unwell and they wear a mask, that potentially protects the other people around them, because when they cough or sneeze, they're not coughing or sneezing into their hand and it's limiting the spread. If you're not unwell, masks can be beneficial if you're wearing the right type. But if you wear a very flimsy mask, it doesn't work very well, because as you breathe in and out, it becomes moist. And then essentially if someone coughs, the virus might stick to the outside of the mask and potentially expose you more.
Well, that's one argument about not wearing a flimsy mask. Let's turn instead to the UK. There are 4 people that are being tested in hospital in Scotland and another in Northern Ireland after showing symptoms of the coronavirus. All the patients are said to have respiratory symptoms and had been in Wuhan in the past 14 days. Here's more on that from our medical correspondent, Fergus Walsh.
There's some travellers in Scotland, 4 people who come back from Wuhan, who are undergoing tests in Scotland, but they can be isolated. And thankfully, this virus is not as serious, it seems, as SARS, which killed nearly 800 people. Most people will get over it and have a reasonably mild infection.
Thanks to Fergus. Well, other Asian countries have also got confirmed cases that they have from Japan, also South Korea, if we take a look at Singapore, Taiwan, also Thailand and Vietnam. But they're not the only places. Let's go to a different part of the world, the United States. The first case confirmed on the West Coast in Washington State. That was on Tuesday. For more on how this coronavirus outbreak has been spreading, here's again Zhao Yingfeng from Washington, D.C.
If we draw a comparison between the current outbreak and the SARS outbreak in 2003, a major difference that I would point out is that global travel is now more common in China. I mentioned that Wuhan has direct flights to other global major cities, including London and New York. And in this Washington State case, the patient, we understand that he just traveled from Wuhan back to Seattle a few days ago. And in this case, we see that the risk of the virus further spreading is very high, given that the lockdown came relatively late, and we also have no idea where the virus can spread at the moment. We might be seeing travelers going through health checkpoints in major airports in the United States if they're traveling from China, and that's a very necessary precautions at the moment.